Morning. I just want everyone to know I did brush my teeth this morning. Before we start, I'll chair. I'd like to observe a moment of silence for the victims of the plane crash in Washington, D.C. Thank you. Before I forget, committee, we need no quorum on Monday. We'll just have bill introductions. So just at least two of us will be here with the chair. So it's optional for our members. Before I forget, I'll ask for bill introductions. And Senator Shane is, Senator Shane. And then Murphy. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. I would like to introduce 25 RS 0183, an act concerning public health, prohibiting public schools from excluding students from attendance who have not received a legal quarantine or isolation order from the Public Health Department.
Are there any questions from the committee? We'll accept that. Thank you, Senator. Senator Holscher.
Thank you. I have RS 0730, and this authorizes victims of childhood abuse to access their DCF records.
Are there any questions? Objections? We'll accept this.
And then I have one more.
Committee bill, and you have another one. Go ahead.
It's RS 0660. And that is in regard to childhood sexual abuse.
And are there any questions, objections? We'll accept the bill as well. Thank you. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I have RS 0755. It's a bill concerning abortion.
Questions for Senator Murphy? No objections. We'll accept that bill. Thank you. Are there other bill introductions? There being none, we'll start the hearing on Senate Bill 31. I'd ask our reviser, Jenna Moyer, to present to the committee.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Jenna Moyer, Office of Revisor Statutes. This is Senate Bill 31, which updates certain provisions of the Dental Practice Act relating to dentist information requested by patients, in-person practice requirements, unprofessional conduct, and patient complaints. Section 1 amends KSA 6514. Oh, and if this sounds familiar, it's because we heard this bill last year as Senate Bill 103. Which I think passed out of this committee, but it never made it to the House. Section 1 amends KSA 651430 to require a treating dentist to provide a requesting patient with information about the dentist, the dental practice, and emergency contact information. Failure to provide a patient who requests such information would subject the dentist to disciplinary action by the Kansas Dental Board. Section 2 amends KSA 651435, and it strikes language, this would be in subsection D, related to what's known as the 20% requirement. This stricken language in subsection D, in current law, it prohibits a dentist from being professionally associated with a dental clinic unless that dentist is personally present at least 20% of the time when patients are being treated in the office. A dentist violation of this prohibition subjects such dentists to having their license suspended or revoked. And so this bill would strike that. Subsection F is also stricken, and so the current law provides an exception to the rule in D that allows a dentist to own 2 additional offices if those offices are within 125 miles of the dentist's primary office and located in a low population county, and this subsection F is also stricken. Section 3 amends KSA 651436 by adding to the list of offenses that subject a dentist to professional discipline. It adds A21 if a dentist has directed or pressured another dentist, employee, or associate to perform dental care that fails to adhere to the applicable standard of dental care or otherwise violates the Dental Practice Act. And lastly, Section 4 amends KSA 651476. It adds language in subsection B that would prohibit a dentist or a contract for dental services from requiring a patient to sign an agreement that would limit that patient's ability to file a complaint with the dental board. I will be happy to answer questions.
Jenna, are there questions for the revisor? Jenna, there being none, I have a question. I wasn't here for 103. Did it cross the Senate floor as well, or just out of committee?
I think it just got out of committee, but I will double check and get back to you in
And
about.
I can sidebar you, but I would like to know any change that occurred since 103 to this.
Okay, I believe the only thing that changed was just updating the years.
I would expect that. Thank you very much. We have three oral proponents, three opponents. You made it easy on me here this morning. I would give 5 minutes each to the oral proponents and opponents and 5 minutes to the neutral testimony. We'll start with proponents. Speaker O'Neill, please address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And again, I understand that life goes on and it's business as usual in the Capitol, but our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of the victims of the flight from Wichita last night. I hope when the manifest is released that there won't be individuals that are near and dear to us. Thank you for the opportunity to appear on 31. And as Jenna pointed out, this is exactly Senate Bill 103 from last year that passed out of this committee. Those of you that were here last year on the Senate know that late in the session there were a lot of bills that were on general orders that did not get scheduled for debate. It was kind of an unusual session. So we're here again this year on this. I represent the Association of Dental Support Organizations. Those of you who were on the committee last year know a little bit about it, but I'm going to take a moment to talk about our association. Dental support organizations are companies that dentists may contract with to do strictly administrative, the administrative side, the non-clinical side of dental practices. The advantage of that, of course, is that dentists would prefer to spend as close to 100% of their time actually treating patients and not having to handle the business side of things. The advent of the dental support organizations fits a very specific need that has been expressed by the dental profession. This is not a DSO bill. Our association, one of the services that we provide our members and dentists in general is advocacy. And so ADSO advocates for dental issues all over the country, whether they involve dentists that have a DSO affiliation or not. And this is one of those examples. Last year, for example, we sponsored the Dental Compact Bill that passed and was signed into law. So DSOs in Kansas operate under KSA 651471. That's been the case since 2011. So this has been a business model that's been working very well in Kansas for the last 14 plus, nearly 14 years. What is unique about Kansas, and it's not in a flattering way, is that Kansas is literally the only state in the country, and dentistry is the only profession that has this rule that Jenna just talked about. It is a rule that no other state has that requires a dentist owner, if they are going to have a second or subsequent practice somewhere else, to spend at least 20% of their professional time either providing clinical services in that remote location or overseeing, it doesn't say supervising, it says overseeing the operation there. That is a requirement that no other dentist has. Non-owner dentists who are practicing in a practice don't have any oversight responsibility, nor any minimum amounts of time. This is the rule that we want to repeal so that we join the other 49 states in not having an unnecessary restriction on the ability of a dentist owner to have more than one practice. So one of the examples I give you is the optometric statute. Literally, it's the next chapter in the KSAs. for optometrists, there is anybody under the optometric practice, there is a proactive provision that says, quote, "A licensee shall not be limited in the number of locations from which the licensee may engage in the practice of optometry." So dentists in Kansas are the only ones that have this arbitrary limitation on the expansion of a dental office. And in Kansas, this is uniquely a problem in that we have a chronic need for dental services, not only in the rural area where you might imagine, and which is absolutely true, but you actually have some problems even in some metro areas. One of the things I point out in my testimony and the points that are attached is that in the last 10 years, Topeka alone has suffered a decrease of 19% in their dental offices. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics also tracks a lot of this data. It is predicted that in the next few years, Wichita will have a loss of at least 12.
Speaker, if other proponents have yielded time, you may continue. Otherwise, we'll take questions at the end.
I'll be happy to take questions at the end.
Okay, thank you.
I want to keep you on track.
Thank you, sir. I'd like welcome to the podium Dr. Daniel Thomas. You have 5 minutes unless you're yielding time back.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, esteemed members of the Kansas Senate.
A little closer to the microphone, just bend it down. Thank you.
I am Daniel Thomas, a practicing periodontist, a business owner, and a proud servant of the people of Kansas. My experience as a member and vice president of the Kansas Dental Board, a board member of the University of Kansas Hospital Authority, and a regent of the Kansas Board of Regents, has provided me with a profound understanding of our healthcare system, its victories, challenges, and the spaces in between. Today, I stand before you to shed light on the piece of legislature that I believe is curbing our collective potential, the current 20% rule. Laws that safeguard patients' welfare and oversee the professional conduct of dental practitioners are undoubtedly necessary and wholeheartedly embraced. However, when such regulations unintentionally obstruct very goals they are designed to accomplish, they command our attention and thoughtful reassessment. The 20% rule is one of such regulations, and I advocate its repeal. I offer 6 persuasive reasons for the reconsideration of this rule. First, after chairing the Kansas Board of Regents Oral Health Task Force, I personally witnessed the widening gap of oral health care accessibility, particularly among our aged, disabled, children, uninsured, and low-income citizens. The current rule inadvertently dissuades dentists and dental specialists from investing in, buying, or establishing dental practices, particularly in smaller towns, exacerbating the existing dental care deficiency. Second, the 20% rule lacks a compelling public interest justification. Introduced in 2014 to replace the 50% rule that was enforced in the early 1960s, this change was met with high expectations. However, after a decade, we find ourselves lacking substantial evidence to suggest any enhancement in patient care, increased access to oral care to all Kansans, or an impact on the practices of individual licensed dentists. Third, it is essential to note the responsibility for providing quality dental care rests fundamentally on the shoulders of every individual licensed dentist. The delivery of skilled, honest, and accountable dental care is the sole responsibility of the individual licensed dentist. The 20% rule unfortunately fails to guarantee the skill, integrity, knowledge, or the dental care possessed or provided by each individual licensed dentist, casting doubts on its value as a regulatory measure. Fourth, the rule has caused a decline in the availability of dental specialty services. For example, in 2012, due to the then 50% rule, Manhattan, Kansas lost its only periodontist. Despite having the adequate staff to continue the specialty services, I decided against acquiring this practice. Even today, Manhattan lacks a full-time periodontist, forcing its citizens from Manhattan and the surrounding areas to travel to Topeka and Salina for specialty periodontal care.
You have 1 minute, doctor.
Fifth, the rule has led to the regrettable forced closure of several dental practices, including that of my wife, Dr. Donna Thomas, a pediatric dentist. Donna was a member and president of the Kansas Dental Board from 2023 through 2018. Our specialty practice in Olathe, Kansas, held immense promise, but the stifling requirements of the 20% rule forced us to close. Sixth, the 20% rule has been manipulated by individuals harboring personal vendettas, diverting its intended purposes of safeguarding patients. I personally experienced this in 2008 when I was wrongfully accused of violating the 50% rule. Such allegations inflict significant emotional distress, financial burdens, the need to retain legal counsel, and can lead to the closure of practices. Kansas stands alone as the only state that imposes such a unique requirement. No other state or profession mandates a minimum presence
Thank you,
for
Dr.
a licensed
Thomas.
owner.
Did Mr. Wilk yield 2 more time, or there are 4 paragraphs left in his written testimony, or I'd appreciate if you would read that. We welcome to the podium William Wilk, Kansas Chamber. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be in front of the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee today to see some familiar faces along as with new faces. So my name is William Wilk, Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Kansas Chamber of Commerce. And the Kansas Chamber of Commerce appreciates the opportunity to submit proponent testimony to Senate Bill 31, a bill relating to the regulation of dentists. As you are aware, this bill would repeal a portion of KSA 65-1435, which requires a dentist to spend 20% of their time in an office treating and seeing patients. We believe this statute prevents a dentist from opening multiple office locations, contracting their ability to grow one's business practice, along with providing a lack of access to dental care to Kansans. The Kansas Chamber will always continue to support the deregulation of business practices and without sacrificing any safety concerns when it comes to the regulation of health-related issues and practices. I am happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time, but I would like to yield my time to Mr. O'Neill or Dr. Thomas, if that's okay.
You can yield the 4 minutes back. Go ahead. Who's up? Welcome back to the podium, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. One thing I wanted to give you a little bit of background history. The KDA has not always opposed this bill. Back in 2022, doing our due diligence, we reached out to the KDA and told them that we'd like to eliminate the 20% rule, and we entered into negotiations that led to the introduction of Senate Bill 103. I have at least 4 pieces of information that signifies their agreement. One is a series of emails back and forth in which we reached agreement on language that we would add to the bill that has been specifically requested by the KDA. We then jointly, Mr. Robertson and I jointly appeared before the Kansas Dental Board to let them know of what we were thinking. And the minutes of the board, I'm happy to share that with anybody who wants to. The minutes of the Dental Board meeting indicated the agreement and that this would be filed as a joint bill. The minutes also reflect the Dental Board's belief that the 20% rule is an outlier, indicating that Kansas is the only state that has this. This is not an issue that we have with a regulatory agency overreaching. This was not something the Kansas Dental Board ever wanted. It was something that was passed by the legislature. Third, the Kansas Dental Board Journal that was published reflects that their concern with the 20% rule is alleviated by the addition of the language that you see in Senate Bill 31. And finally, the testimony that was presented when the bill was first introduced states, KDA appreciates the Association of Dental Support Organizations bringing this issue to us and accepting that KDA's proposed patient protection language, which we believe can adequately replace the 20% rule. by, among other things, creating transparency of dental practice ownership and emergency contact information for patients and holding dentist owners and supervisors accountable to the Kansas Dental Board, specifically. And with these new with these new patient protections in place, the KDA supports Senate Bill 103. Literally, the day of the hearing, where we came in as joint proponents, the Kansas Dental Association reneged on that agreement and then stand in opposition. We believe that that's probably a function of internal association politics. We know that sometimes happens, but it's no less disappointing to us. We could have easily deleted that language because the KDA now opposes it. We have not, because we think that in fact it was true then and it's true now. That language sufficiently replaces the need for the 20% rule. And we also believe that it's an ethical obligation on our part that if we reach an agreement, that we keep that agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Former. Would you stay at the podium, sir, in case we have questions for you?
Yes.
We'll now do 5 minutes of questions. Senator Owens. Sorry.
Perfectly fine, Mr. Vice Chairman. Not a problem at all. I'll always be a representative at heart. So as I was reading through your testimony, Mr. O'Neill, I actually was looking up the DSO organization. So I guess my first question is, certainly they don't advocate on behalf of every dental-related matter one way or another. So does the DSO feel like they have something to gain out of this? Would be my first question.
Yeah, I mean, they have dentists who contract with them for their non-clinical services. Obviously, they see a need, not only dentists, but dental hygienists and anybody in the ancillary professions want to provide additional access to dental care, which in most states is a problem, but it's uniquely a problem in Kansas. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question. They do advocate for issues that affect all dentists, because what's good for dental patients in the state, it doesn't matter whether you're a dentist that does not have a DSO relationship or they have a DSO relationship. What's good for one is good for all.
Thank you, and if I may, from my perspective, I just always try to understand the motives of those testifying for or against something, right? It helps kind of get to it, so that's what I was trying to understand. So the DSOs believe that if we pass this bill, there would be growth in the dental industry, and by default, they hope to capture some of that business that may grow as a result.
Well, it's not a matter of capturing business. They just offer a service. Dentists can either choose to contract and use that model or not. But certainly, I'll repeat, what's good for the profession will ultimately be good for them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here and for your testimony. And this is for any of the proponents. If I understand correctly, the 20% rule was trying to address making sure that patient safety and quality of care was provided by a dentist owner. Is there data to suggest or compare Kansas, since we stand alone with having that rule, and the other 49 states as to an increase or decrease in patient care and safety? Do we have any data comparing us to show that that is in case the effect of the 20% rule?
Not specifically, because no other state has the 20% rule, but you can contrast. For instance, I've got, and I think I point this out in my attachments, there's like 25 more reasons why we think this is good. If you look at the map of the distribution of offices in the various states who use the DSO model, it is a broad coverage of geography. If you look at that distribution in Kansas, it's concentrated only in the metropolitan areas, because there's really a disincentive for any of those dentist owners to expand beyond where they're currently at because of the 20% rule. So you do see that contrast. I also point out in my counterpoint attachment, quality of care issues. There's a patient satisfaction metric that shows that offices that provide these services through a DSO have a higher patient satisfaction rate overall. And of course, the quality of care issues, you can look at disciplinary results. There is no difference between dentists who have a DSO practice or don't have a DSO practice in terms of quality of care issues from their patients. And like I mentioned, our research indicates that the patient satisfaction is higher.
We'll make sure the attachments are available. Right now, we're not finding them on the S drive, so Suzanne will help us out. It's all one doc, okay. Any further? That's the attachment. Oh, Senator Petty, and we are at 30 seconds.
Thank you. And so we do have DSOs in Kansas right now.
We do.
But as you mentioned, they're only in our larger metropolitan areas.
True.
And of the DSOs that we have now, how many actually take Medicaid?
The distribution is about the same. In fact, I think I sent an invite out earlier to tour one of the sites here in Topeka that is predominantly Medicaid, and they do a lot of pediatric dentistry. In fact, they appeared a couple days ago to ask for increases in Medicaid reimbursement rates. And so the distribution of DSO versus non-DSO Medicaid is about the same.
Thank you. I think we're out of time for questions for the proponents. Thank you for your testimony. Note that there is written only by Samuel G. McRoberts from the Kansas Justice Institute. We'll now turn to opponent oral testimony, 5 minutes each or 15 minutes total. We'll leave 5 minutes for questions. Chair welcomes Kevin Robertson to the podium.
Good morning, committee. Mr. Vice Chairman, appreciate the opportunity to appear for you on behalf of the Kansas Dental Association and our position and thoughts regarding this particular bill. KDA is opposed to Senate Bill 31 because it does remove the current law in dental practice requiring a dentist owner to be in an office at least 20% of the time that dentistry is being performed in that office. No doubt the 20% rule is a unique requirement for dentistry, but it exists for a reason, to ensure that dentist owners are engaged in providing oversight to employee dentists and the patients they serve. The KDA believes that this best protects the dentist-patient relationship and ultimately best for the patients and the people of Kansas. And Dr. Wilms and Dr. Merkline, who are here with me today, will talk a little bit more about that in their testimony. Of course, all dentists practicing in Kansas must abide by the 20% rule, particularly those dentist owners that are contemplating expanding their practice. It does provide them or requires them to have thoughtful consideration on what practices they can oversee without specifically, I'll say, willy-nilly expanding throughout the state. Where you might have someone in Kansas City who might have practices that they really have very little control over or certainly monitor. The Association of Dental Support Organizations has brought this bill for us today. I will say that according to the most recent data that I have is that Kansas has 12% of dentists in Kansas are DSO-supported dentists. The national average is 14%. So I bring that up because even with this restrictive language as it's been portrayed, we're still right within the national average of this dental support organizations. Good morning, Madam Chairman. Senate Bill 31 will provide...
Excuse me, sorry, let us show that we welcome Chair Gossage to the table.
Thank you, everybody. Madam Chair.
I won't be smiling very big.
I hope you were able to get, I don't know what
I
your
went to
dental
visit
issue
my
was.
dentist, and she said, I will see you at 4 o'clock.
You may proceed.
I'm about 10 seconds into my testimony. I'm just kidding. So we're going to restart the clock on it. No. Senate Bill 31 will promote the expansion of private equity-driven DSOs. And based on current locations, practices of DSO practices, it does not appear likely that they will locate in underserved areas in our state, but will instead proliferate in Kansas' largest communities under the umbrella of several satellite dental practices. The KDA has worked with DSOs in the past, and it was mentioned, I think, by Speaker O'Neill's testimony. In 2011, we did work with the DSOs to create the dental franchisor for administrative dental support organizations. This is the section, it's Senate Bill KSA 651524. And I would like to point out that this is a little different than optometry, and I know that's mentioned an awful lot, that optometry says that you can have as many practices as you want. Within the Optometry Practice Act 651522, it also says, nothing therein can contain shall be construed to permit the franchise practice of optometry. So it's a classic oranges versus apples comparison. The Optometry Act, if Kansas Dental Practice Act had the same provisions of the Optometry Act, DSOs would not even be permitted because would be the franchise practice of dentistry. So that comparison is not good. Back in 2014, we did work with the DSOs again. It used to be a 50% rule. We changed that to 20%. As a matter of fact, Dr. Thomas testified in support of that, and we worked with him and others to lower those provisions back in 2014. I would like to just state that, we do not believe that the expansion or the elimination of the 20% rule will increase access to care. It didn't in 2011 when we created the Franchise or Practice Act. It didn't in 2014. And it has nothing to do with really the restrictions in the Dental Practice Act. It has more to do with the environment in Kansas, in those locations, Medicaid reimbursement rates, and populations of several areas that just really cannot support a dentist. So though I do believe that DSOs would have more practices if this were to pass, they would be in larger metropolitan areas and not create more access to care throughout the state of Kansas. With that, I don't know where we are with minutes, or whatever, but it feels like we're close. So I will wrap that up and hope that you would oppose Senate Bill 31. And we're going to do questions at the end, right? So I'll be ready to go. Thank you.
I want to thank my vice chair for taking over for me at a kind of an emergency last-minute situation, and I'm sure he did a great job. We will begin with questions now, and have we had?
2 more oral testimonies.
Oh, forgive me.
Sorry.
Yes. So 2 more oral proponents. So we would have Kayla. Hi, Kayla. Welcome to committee.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak on Senate Bill 31 regarding the Kansas Dental Practice Act and the 20% rule. My name is Dr. Kayla Wilms, and I'm here on behalf of myself and my colleagues and partners, Dr. Brad Adams, who's also in attendance, and Dr. Neely Newkirk, and our practice, Free State Dental. Our local 4-doctor private practice is located in Lawrence, Kansas, and was founded over 30 years ago. We currently serve almost 13,000 patients in Lawrence and the surrounding communities. Additionally, this past October, we opened our 2nd location in DeSoto, Kansas, at the request of the community based on the anticipated growth and need for more access to dental care. While each owner dentist in our office spends consistent amounts of time in both of our locations, we also firmly believe it to be important to have an owner dentist present during all patient care hours. I can confidently speak for our practice when I say serving our patients and neighbors are the reasons we exist and the core of our existence at Free State Dental. Without hesitation, we donate substantial time, expertise, and financial resources to support our local community groups and organizations, in addition to our active patient base. We work collaboratively with other local providers and agencies to ensure we're doing our part to strengthen the place we call home. We are privileged to foster a wonderful connection with our patients. We have celebrated, we have grieved, we have shared in some of life's most momentous occasions together. We provide compassion and competency in people's most vulnerable moments. In return for their trust in us, our patients receive consistency in their providers and feel confident knowing that their dentist has a continual understanding of their unique goals, circumstances, and health. Our patients know that their dentist is invested in their best interest in the quality of care we provide and the reputation of the office we operate. While we proudly hang our names on the door, the patients of Free State Dental do not need to see them to know who owns the office. Our actions and our hearts speak for us. I can only speak from personal experiences, but there are opposing recurring feelings that we see coming from patients who transfer their care to us from DSO offices. Feelings of overwhelm and frustration. Many patients report obstacles obtaining records in a timely manner, challenges where they felt they spent more time discussing the financial aspect than they did receiving information about their oral health. They were overwhelmed after being presented with large, expensive treatment plans that ultimately did not address their concern or the priority of the patient. As further evidence of these observations, we have interviewed dentists who have left DSOs in our area to pursue careers in private practice that describe pressures from their office leaders to perform treatment that they were not comfortable with in treatment times they did not feel were adequate. These dentists ultimately left believing that the patients were not receiving the type of care that they deserved. For all of these reasons I have stated, and because we believe patients should be the focus, we at Free State Dental oppose Senate Bill 31. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Next, we have Taylor Merklin. Taylor, did I say the last name even close? My father pronounces it like that. Okay.
Years.
Now you have me curious. How do you pronounce it?
It's actually Merkline. So my
Merkline.
husband is from north central Kansas, Phillipsburg, Kansas, and there's a big German population there.
Ah, so you're going to go by them instead of your dad. Got it.
Yeah.
All right, please continue.
Good morning, welcome. Thank you so much for having me here. Hopefully I can do justice to what my heart is saying by addressing you all today. So I remember my first dental experience as a kid, not just the one where you go for like your cleaning, but the real deal like cavity that had to get fixed. And I'll say it didn't go well. Several days later, we saw our dentist out at a restaurant, and he came and said hello to my parents. And I realized at that moment he's just a normal person. So for those of you who grew up with that community setting, I would venture to guess you've had like a similar experience. Maybe your dentist, you saw them at church, maybe they had a kid in your class. The specifics don't really matter, but what matters is that they were a pillar of your community. I'm a general dentist. I work in private practice. I am a part owner of a small group practice. We have 14 employees in Atchison, Kansas. A dentist has to have two lines of thinking that they must balance: what is best for the treatment and what is best for the business. Our profession is bound by a code of ethics that ensures we do what is in the best interest of the patients. For most dentists, these things go hand in hand. You treat your patients well, your business does well. A dentist office that is run solely by the business mindset will not focus on what is best for the patient. We have all heard stories of an experience that has led someone to mistrust a dentist. Dentists that are overextended, overleveraged, or underengaged in their practices may lose focus on the balance between the business and the patient care. Patients have to have trust in us. No one can see inside their own mouth. Nobody can understand what we see. So the trust we have with our patients is very critical. Erosion of that trust is detrimental to our patients, our communities, and ultimately our profession. Because of this, I encourage you to vote no on SB 31, which requires that the dentist must be in the office 20% of the time to oversee the dentistry going on there and their patients and the patient care. DSOs and large group practices are wanting to remove this law, essentially to open practices without these dentist owners being an active part of the patients that they serve, of the community that they serve, which risks undermining the trust that the patients have in our profession. I am not stating DSOs and large group practices are bad. In fact, they can be really excellent avenues for dentists that are uninterested in running the business side of dentistry. They offer resources that can help dentists run successful practices. Kansas already has operating DSOs in our state that includes 12% of the dentists here, which is on par with the national average. They are currently having to operate to a standard with the 20% rule in place that allows for expansion while maintaining quality dental care for Kansas residents. If the rationale exists that abolishing the 20% rule allows them to enter the dental deserts of Kansas and provide care, My question would be, why haven't they opened 5 clinics Southwest Kansas under the existing framework? Not because that wouldn't benefit the patients, but because it doesn't benefit them and the profit margins that they need to make. If this law passes, they probably will open a few practices outside their current metro areas. However, make no mistake about it, they are a for-profit entity and will open practices in and compete with communities that already have existing dental practices. Part of the magic of states like Kansas is the sense of community that I mentioned earlier. You see the small business owners are involved in making the community better. They have pride in what they do and the patients that they serve. The 20% rule protects Kansas residents. It protects the dentist-patient relationship by ensuring that the owners are providing oversight to their employees and the patients that they serve. Again, I encourage you to vote no on SB 31. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taylor. And committee, I would address your attention to the opponent written-only testimony as well. We do have neutral oral testimony from Tanya. Tanya, are you available?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you for the chance to be with you this morning, and I promise I'll be brief. My name is Tanya Dorf-Bruner. I'm the Executive Director of Oral Health Kansas. We are actually here with neutral testimony, but we've had lots of conversations about the 20% rule over the years, and just wanted to share some of the perspectives of our organization. So, as I said, we're the consumer oral health advocacy organization in the state. We get a lot of calls from people who are looking for dental care. We can't always help them, but most of the people who call us are people with disabilities, people who live in rural communities, people who have Medicaid coverage and can't find dentists that can see them. So we have some questions, I guess, about the 20% rule as well. We know, as you've heard, most of the dental service organizations in Kansas are in the larger areas. They're in Wichita, Topeka, Kansas City. Under this legislation, there's really no way to guarantee dental offices would open in underserved communities. There's really no way to do that, especially in the rural areas. There's also really no way to guarantee those dental offices would be Medicaid providers. In fact, some of the national dental service organizations have a national policy of not accepting Medicaid. And that's something that we have a lot of concern about, because we know that there's the dental provider network in the Medicaid program is extremely low. And we need to expand access to dental care, but expand it in rural areas, expand it for people who are underserved and for people who have Medicaid coverage. So those are just some thoughts that we've had, and just thanks for the chance to share those with you today.
Thank you, Tanya. And now, committee, are there any questions for the opponents? Senator Owens. His fault. He started calling you representative. You know, I would never do that.
I'm just going to keep saying the same thing. I'll always be a representative at heart. That's where I started. So, no, thank you very much. My first question is for Mr. Robertson. And then my second question, permitting, is for either one of the doctors that were opponent. So, Mr. Robertson, is there any data to suggest that the 49 other states are less safe as a result of removing the 20% rule?
Yeah, I know that question was asked of Mr. O'Neill as well, and I don't know of any, so I do not know that there's any data that confirms that.
Okay, thank you very much. That helps. And then for Ms. Wilms or Ms. Merkline, while one of you is coming up, I just want to have a question. I mean, I know that the doctor-patient relationship is incredibly important. I absolutely appreciate and respect that. But there's also this idea that patients have a choice, right? And if they're not happy, whether it's a DSO or not, they can still make a choice. So in my kind of free market mind, it seems like this 20% rule kind of actually prohibits a choice because there's less choices that could come into the state. Would either one of you guys like to comment on that? Sure.
Sorry, could you re-ask that question one more time, please?
Yeah, no problem. It seems like the 20% rule limits a free market, right? And if patients have a choice, and I'm a small business owner myself, I totally understand customer service and that relationship, but it seems like the 20% rule is limiting the free market. Whether you agree or disagree, patients still have a choice. And so do you agree with that statement, and what would be your rebuttal to that?
Yeah, so I do believe that patients have the choice, but I believe also that when you have an erosive experience, it ruins it for your neck. Like it makes a bigger challenge for the next time you go. Also, I would say that, like I said, I don't think DSOs are inherently negative things. And this is just from my personal experience, and I'm like a dental geek, so I follow all of the things online, all of the groups, all of the things, there is a mounting pressure when you're trying to be a small business entrepreneur from these large corporations to buy you up and make things easier for you. And I can see the value in that, but it becomes not, because I welcome competition. I welcome competition because I firmly believe we do the best. But the market pressure that I think will ensue will be insurmountable for a lot of entrepreneurs and stifle like future entrepreneurship if all of the businesses or a lot of the businesses are owned by major corporations coming out of dental school. You would never be able to buy this as a 30-year-old, as a 36-year-old. You would be an employee forever, which isn't bad, but that's what I would say to that.
Add to that. So, yeah, I guess I truly, before you ask that, I personally did not view the DSOs in our area as competition. We have one a block away from us. We have several others in the area. I think that my viewpoints come from the feedback that I get from patients when they come to our office. As you mentioned, they have a choice, and many of them choose to transfer their care. And so the frustrations really come down to they truly believe, because of the marketing, that they were going to a private practice to begin with. Because I think a lot of people have a perception of corporate dentistry. And so when they have experiences that are unfavorable, they want to transfer care, but then they're met with these huge obstacles, like you can't get your x-rays for 30 days, but many of these patients are financially limited, and that limits their ability to use their insurance to pay for those treatments. And so when they can't get x-rays transferred over, we have to then find a way to navigate getting the information to help them address their true concerns, which weren't addressed initially. Yes.
Thank you. We do have several other questions.
Okay.
So ladies, if you want to stay there for just a moment. Senator Holscher, then Senator Thompson, and then Senator Petty. If you would tell me if you have a question specifically for them or if it's for Kevin while they're up there.
Yeah, for the doctors, please,
All right.
thank you. I do appreciate it's been brought up that we have 12% DSOs in Kansas versus the 14% nationwide, because I had the perception that we were being really held back in regard to the rules, but obviously it's much closer to what we see nationwide. So I'd love for you to elaborate. Either of you, you've talked a little bit about patients that transferred and dentists that transferred. I mean, in terms of patient care, are we talking about procedures that have been done incorrectly or just unnecessarily? If you could elaborate.
What has been relayed to me is that there was a strong pressure from office leadership that were not dentists to perform treatments that those dentists did not feel comfortable performing, and that they were given inadequate amounts of time to perform those procedures, ultimately feeling the sense that the patients left with poor experiences. For example, a 6-hour root canal.
Thank you. Before we go to Senator Thompson, I just have a question for Jenna. Jenna, is there anything in this bill that specifically mentions DSOs?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will double check, but I don't believe there's any that Dental Service Organization is mentioned specifically in the bill.
Thank you. I'm hearing a lot about those, but I don't even believe that's in the bill. Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for testifying, either Kayla or Taylor, on this one. It almost sounds like in your testimony that people have come to you after experiencing DSOs, and, there is an element of caveat emptor, buyer beware. But it almost sounds like it benefits you because then they realize the experience there, whatever, was not as good. And that, I realize there's issues with transferring x-rays or things of that nature. However, in the end, if they're getting better care from you, it sounds like the competition weeds out the bad actors, if there are bad actors in your territory.
If you were looking at it from a business perspective, sure, but when I am there every day, I'm looking at it from the patient's perspective, and it is sometimes heartbreaking that they've had those experiences, and then we have to work to jump past those hurdles of trust and comfort. So yeah, in a business sense, yes, we're grateful, but just looking at patient experience is important.
Sorry, I was going to say that, like I said, I personally am not against DSOs. I firmly believe, though, that a dentist owner in any capacity, whether private practice, needs to be involved in the patient care. Otherwise, there will be a misbalance between running the business and providing patient care.
I know the dentist I go to, they have the picture of the dentist there, and I know him personally because it's a fairly small town. Yeah, I'm struggling with this because I think the competition is good, and I think that there's an element of caveat emptor. If you go into a dental office and you don't know who's owning it, and maybe you go somewhere else. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Thompson. Senator Petty, do you have are your questions for either of the doctors?
Actually, it's for Kevin.
All right, thank you, ladies.
And Kevin, I was just wondering if you might be able to provide us with information about, since it doesn't appear that this kind of legislation has led to any real growth of services in other states. We have 12% of our dental practice now with DSOs, and in comparison to the national average of 14%, I'd be curious as to whether your organization has access to information that shows in other states how much services is being provided in rural areas. Because to me, this looks like an opportunity to expand. I live in a metropolitan area. There are DSOs there. And now we only have that service in 9 of our cities in Kansas. So I don't see where it's really going to address the issue of service and availability of service. It's competition might be an issue, and I'm not sure that always translates into quality of care. But is that a piece of information that you can get for us?
Yeah, I can see what we can come up with. If not through the American Dental Association, perhaps even Mr. O'Neill's organization might be able to help with that.
Thank you.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for either one of the dentists in the room. Quickly, I know that you've talked a lot about patients coming to you, you getting patients transferred. So my question to you is, have you ever had patients transfer from another private practice?
Yeah, patients, they are welcome to go wherever they feel comfortable, wherever they want to seek care. I think that the Senate Bill 31, though, basically advocates for responsible expansion with respect to our profession. Theoretically, based on this, you could own 5 practices, and you could be based out of Wichita and go 120 miles from Wichita to open other offices if you wanted to. Like I said, I think that the proponent arguments are, wanting to allow no oversight of the business of the actual direct patient care, which I don't advocate for.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, just a quick follow-up. So,
Yeah.
really, the quality of care is not so dependent on the model. It's dependent on the individual dentist. And I would also ask, so you say, why wouldn't a dentist already go out and do that? If a dentist is having to spend 20% of their time in each one, the travel time, the ability, the time constraints, would that not be a factor in them not being able to expand out into these areas that need dentists? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead. Yeah, so yeah, the travel time, we have dentists commuting from Kansas City to Atchison on a daily basis. I think it's what you value in your practice and how you value your patients. Depends on if you would be willing to travel, that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
I have one last question for you before we close the hearing, and that is, If this 20% was removed, would that affect you directly with your business or with your practice?
I do not believe so.
Thank you very much. Committee, this closes the hearing on Senate Bill 31, and we are